Welcome, Jedi, or Jedi Potentials. If you haven't seen our first video, it's a long one. I'm hoping that you're a Jedi Pathworker or have an interest in working the path. I'm going to now talk about myself a little bit. I tried to avoid that in the first video. Some things have to spill out sometimes to show that you yourself, as a person doing something, has a little understanding and has a point from where their own perspective comes from. I do and don't like talking about myself. I may have a mild degree of autism. It's not diagnosed, but tests and analysis that can be done on your own point towards that. So when I say I like to talk about myself and I don't, that's a very real truth. I enjoy self-expression because it's an expression of the soul. It lets me share something with you that you can't otherwise connect to me with. If we just sit in a room alone, I can pour myself into the Force and you will feel the comfort, you'll feel the joy, the love that I have. But you won't know about me and what makes all of that up. So, let's dive in. This is going to be focused on my Jedi history, which starts with my mystical history. At a very young age, I learned the basics of magic and utilized them in a very bad way. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to get into the details of it. One of the reasons I'm not getting into super deep details on it is that I've done this a million times. I've done this as introductions in written form, video form. And frankly, if I talk about it too much, people just go, oh, he loves the bad old days. And no, I tell you about the bad old days because I know you can come back if you're there. If you're watching this, I know you can come back to the light. No matter who you are, no matter where you're at, no matter what evils you've done, I have faith you can come back to the light. Because I did. After my mother passed away, I was a broken young man. She was all I had. I was 19. I was out on my own. I didn't understand the world. I didn't know how to do anything. And I found more books on mysticism. That didn't lead me to the dark road. Mysticism was actually a salvational force. Without the ability to manipulate some of the probabilities in my life to move things in a subtle way, I wouldn't be here this day talking to you on this video. I wouldn't own my own house, and I wouldn't be a practicing mystic. And that is going to be covered in this, so that I don't have to cover it later. So people don't start saying, well, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But I have a period of what I call the bad old days. And it's somewhere around 2001, 2002, late in 2001, early 2002, I meet my mentor, who was a wonderful person who helped me with many, many things. But he had his own quirks, and his views, the way he taught, were very encouraging of negative traits. And I had many of those that I was working through. I became pretty terrible for a little bit. I hurt people at will without concern or intent and without introspection. And I realized at some point that I wasn't the man that I wanted to be. So somewhere around 2002, mid to late 2003, early, I started the Jedi Path. I was working at a grocery store for just above minimum wage. I had no internet. I had no access to what you will have access to right now. I didn't have the luxuries that you're relying on. I had books. And I had training. And I didn't even have the movies on DVD, the original trilogy. But I got them very soon into this. As soon as I started looking into this, they released them. So that could be a marker time. Well, I shouldn't say as soon. I was already in the books for several months and doing some of the training. But they released them very soon into this, and it became a definitive confirmation I could be this. After all, I studied chaos magic, and that's all about making something out of something that isn't really real. And most magical systems work with a universal force or flow, a concept, an idea of an existential essence. But it's more than an idea, it's a reality when you're working with it. And so there was the Force. I already had the Force, that was the easy part. I had a year or two of training on my own and with a mentor whose primary focus was stripping away things like dogma, stripping away things like the necessity of symbolism to work the arts. So I could pull a ritual apart, put it back together, and as he said, if the ritual is not just a pattern, if you can't just do it like this, you can't do a whole ritual that you just did again, like that, you have not mastered it. And I brought that into my understanding of being a Jedi. So when I started learning how to use the Force, and I started using it in this way, I'd already developed a very deep connection to that. Now I needed structure, and that came with the Jedi Code in its complete form. That would be all three versions: the emotion yet peace, the there is no emotion, there is peace, and Jedi are. Now those codes are very good, and since then I've added the Jedi Oath to that. And I'll get into those things later on, but those things saved me from the darkness. Now, I have my own views on the use of energy and the Force for personal defense, defense of others, bettering yourself, bettering your position in life. And those will not always be popular. Yes, I think you can use the Force to better yourself in life once you have the introspection to know how you're moving it. You can move it and do no harm. You can move it so that when you're going in for an interview, you're the best person for the job, you will be noticed for it. It's a subtle pressure. It's not taking over someone's mind. It's making sure that you've been made aware that you're there. And we see this in the mythos all the time. The mind trick is the most common one, and it's used like a bludgeon. You can do that too if that's necessary, but I would not recommend that at first. It's very easy to fall with that. If you have any skill in it, and most people, it takes a while to get any skill in it. So if you're watching this, you may or may not have a large, deep skill set. You probably can't do a mind trick very well. And that's okay. And you may never be able to. Some people, they only can develop the sensory side. That's more than enough to be a Jedi, to be honest. If you have the deep introspective sense of the Force, you can feel its flow and its guidance. And you can draw on it some for inner strength. I would say that, and maybe augment some of your existing abilities to be a little better than you were. Those would be the criteria of using the Force from my perspective, and that's what I went with. My training started with a lot of stretches, a lot of martial arts, Jeet Kune Do, reading books on Aikido, studying Qigong, going into depth, deep breathing meditations, 10-hour meditations, 12-hour meditations, taking off large blocks of time to sit in contemplation, to read, to study, to make notes. This is what I did from 2002, 2003, around there, to 2005. I joined the Jedi community, and many people were Jedi, by my estimation, in it, and many others were people that were more religious and adding on to it. I'm going to tell you right now, I believe you can have an outside religion as a Jedi, but still to be a Jedi in your heart means that is more symbolism for you than the core of who you are. So for me, I'm also Norse. I discovered that within the same time frames. What that means is the Norse gods called me. Am I a raging berserker? No. The Norse is so very undefined that being Jedi and Norse is exponentially easy. It is harder for Christians, I would say, to some degree, because you have this idea of God, and you have these tenets and these adherents, and you may have things in it that says you have to do things that hurt people, where the code and the path and all of the philosophy says you shouldn't, or you may be compelled to help people in ways that, from your view, that are antithetical to the Jedi respecting freedom. That's actually part of my oath up on, there we go, that's how the camera works, on that plaque right there. An oath to turn away from the dark side and to be a champion and a guardian of justice and freedom. I'll get to that oath in a bit. In the community, I found friendships that have lasted me a lifetime. I am connected to some of the biggest names by virtue of having met them in person, worked with them, trained with them, helped some of them grow, and some of them helped me grow a lot too. I hold a view that we pull too much from other religions. and not enough from Jedi inherent techniques, and we are losing the path. So as a path worker, as a teacher, as a path worker, I don't use the term master, even though I listed in the previous, very often because of the connotations of the community. Look, master kind of rhymes with a cuss word, and when people use that word with me, it almost always means the other thing, it feels like to me. You take that how you want. Having been in the community, I've seen it change, grow, I've seen it be destroyed and rebuilt, and I've seen the fall of the Jedi Pathworkers and the rise of the realists and the religionists, and I recognize that as an evolution. It's easier to pull people to the name when it is not as intense or as restrictive, and the pathworking is more intense and more restrictive. You cannot just believe and be a pathworker. So this is what I've been as a pathworker the entire time. We've never had a word for it. We used to call it realists, but realists have become philosophers with a very loose ideal set that doesn't require the Force and doesn't require the martial. So realist no longer fits. The name has changed. It used to mean that we really used the Force and we really trained. Now it means we really focus on the philosophy. And that's the real part. And doing real world actions, not that you can do mysticism in some other world and have it not be this one in some way. Not that you can study the martial arts in some other world, but the concept is on practicality. So maybe it should be called Jedi Practicalists. But that sounds too much like proctologists, so I'm going to let that drop. I've been in the community long enough to watch the rise and fall of enough things that when I'm not thinking, I talk about them, and I just assume everyone knows, and I'm told that sounds a little arrogant. It's not my intent. I've been here for almost 20 years. You know, it'll be 20 years and 2 more years that I've been in the community. And it's 20 years or more that I've been a part of the path. And it's been my whole life that I've been inspired to be it. When my mother put the Star Wars bed sheets on, and every time I watched the movie, she walked me and go, "There's good lessons for you to learn in that, son. You should watch that, and you should ask, what is right and what is wrong? What is moral? What is a higher power? What is God?" For me, God stopped being a man in a toga or a higher authority. God started becoming an essence, some divine force. God stopped having texts written about him because it wasn't him, it was the. God stopped being in a book. God was an experience. The Force is an experience. The Force can be contained in no book. The Force has roots in things like Taoism. The Force has roots in older mystical beliefs. And in the Tao, it says the Tao that can be put in a book, the Tao that can be written. It's not the Tao. Well, the Force is in no book. The Force can only be talked about in a book. There are many, many good books. Many good books on the Force. But the Force doesn't walk around punishing people. The Force has a larger, vaster will that moves large-scale events, society and the evolution thereof. The Force is why we're reaching a point where we are now attempting to have equality and freedom among all people, in my estimation. So as part of my history in this, I have, through my years, trained in multiple forms of mysticism, including ritual high magic. I've studied multiple forms of meditation. There's very little I haven't learned something about. I've studied multiple martial arts on my own, including karate, Singyi, Bagua. Boxing was my big investment. Wing Chun was my other one, as well as grappling arts such as wrestling. And I've had the joy and pleasure to be trained by an incredible Aiki master on how to roll so I don't break myself in half if someone throws me. And to learn some of the wrist grabs and joint locks. Now, a lot of these things I can learn and I can help someone refine, but my reaction times in that way, because I have no sense of self-preservation when I'm fighting, doesn't work. So I dove into boxing, and then I offset that with the Qigong for the holistic part of it. Because in the boxing, I could develop an art form where I defended myself with movement and not reaction. So I was a harder to hit target by swaying out of the way and then leveling a punch in a soft area. And I learned to do open hand strikes so I wouldn't break my hands against hard areas and hit on the bag with gloves without. That's some of the training I did. Now I got to address the elephant in the room. I don't see anyone else in this room, so it must be me. Someone's going to criticize me for my weight at some point. I'm big again. I was small a while back. What happened? Few things. Number one, when I started this path, I was probably about 280 pounds. Maybe 285. I thought I was huge. I thought I was ginormous. Couldn't imagine how anyone could see me as anything else but this giant blob moving towards him. And that depressed me, and I got up to probably about 375, maybe even 400. I joined the community. I started talking to people. There was a heavy focus on the practical arts of martial arts. There was heavy focus on bettering yourself physically at that time. That's passed to the wayside, and it's coming back thanks to one valiant knight that I know of in particular who is pushing with all they have to bring it back. There's one person out there doing that I know for certain. There may be others. I'm sure there are others, okay? There's one that has my eternal respect for that. You know who you are. And we need it. Right now, I'm beyond doing the super hard exercise sets. I have major tendon issues. We're getting into how that happened, but we're not there yet. So I started the boxing and the routines, and I dropped the weight. My lowest body weight from almost 400 pounds was 228. And most of it was muscle. I was a force to be reckoned with. If I hit you, you knew it for about a second. And then you hit the ground. And you kind of stayed there unless you were very durable. My sparring partner was the strongest person I could find. I invested everything in it. And I gained violence and lost some of the way for a little bit with it. And had to come back. I gained harshness where I needed gentleness. And because of that, I then gained gentleness in times when I needed more harshness. It's easy to get lost. I'm not going to tell you I never have been. But I am the elephant in the room. I am now 325-ish pounds. I'm on a keto diet as of this. Maybe my stomach will hold through it. Maybe it won't. How did I get back to this size? Around 2015, I decided to reboot my life. I called up a Sith friend who's on the Sith path, dedicated to his personal passions. That's what Sith means for him. Being his friend, I am one of his passions. And I said, you talked about rebooting my life. Can we do it? I'll move to Florida. And I want to have more and be able to do more. I'm tired of being stuck in a dead-end job. And I have this sense that one day I'm going to be walking to work and I'm going to die in the cold and the snow. It was a premonition. That year, by the way, was the biggest snowdrift that we had had where I lived in Maryland. Maybe that would have been the year I would have twisted my ankle as I did in the vision. I didn't know, but I knew I needed to move. So I moved. I met the love of my life, Helen. She's been my strength. I'm going to cry. I'm going to keep myself from crying for this. It was determined that she needed a hysterectomy. And I'm going to take the pause in the video to recollect myself so you can see that I am human. She had to have a hysterectomy. By this point, I had started my own business in mysticism. And I'll get into that as a separate thing about being an elephant in the room, okay? Because there's a lot of things I'm an elephant on, but I want to focus on the physical elephant first in this. She had to have a hysterectomy. the Force only knows if I could have ever had kids anyway. The target point for me when I was very young, since I got very big very quick in height and muscle, was always the groin. So I've been kicked there probably 100 times in my youth, 200. Everything works to the degree that it works, which is good enough for me. I don't know that I could father a child to begin with, but I know she couldn't carry it. That is a hard thing. To know you will never pass down the gifts that you've learned to use. My mother was strong with the Force. She was a natural psychic, a natural empath. She could feel so much. That's okay. I put all of my focus and energy on my shop, my mysticism shop. My wife would want for nothing during this time. I spent a lot of money, not just on her health care. Pardon me. Not just on her health care, but on making sure that she had anything she wanted at that moment. She had already had her greatest dream ripped from her. It was necessary to provide a comforting and shielding environment for what would come next with the recovery. So I put everything I had into that. And I gained a lot of the weight back. I was probably at about 250 by that point, just because I was somewhat off my diet and somewhat off my exercise routines already. I ballooned. And I found the depth of depression which comes with knowing you are the last of your line. But as I said, I pull from all of it whenever it's in line with the core philosophy of Legends. And when I refer to Jedi, understand for the rest of this, for every video that comes after, this is what I'm referring to, is my view. That's your last warning. I am the last of my line, but I will not be the last Jedi. So, I found depression. I ate my emotions. I tried to distract myself. I tried to leave the path. I kept helping people at random. I kept bringing them to the way. I couldn't stop doing that. That's outside of me. I started to come back, went through some personal issues I won't get into. Tried to leave again. Couldn't. Even tried to call upon my own darkness to become something dark. It wasn't there. I have no vengeance in my heart, and I have no hatred. I am a Jedi. I do what I feel a Jedi must do in each step. What I lost can never be replaced, even if I adopt. And maybe one day I'll be able to. It's very hard when you have to list your religion as pagan, because Norse is the only one they're going to recognize completely. Norse pagan. Which just means that those gods called me. I don't really... I light a candle to them and I keep an alliance because I feel that they are honest gods about who they are and what they are. They don't claim to be all good. But I am a Jedi first. I am a champion of those who need me first. What my wife lost and what I lost can never be replaced. I'm 41. I wouldn't be a very good father at this point in my mind. I wouldn't be able to play ball. I have massive injuries from the boxing training. I have tendonitis from birth, and the increased weight has slowed me down. I'm the elephant in the room. The elephant used to weigh 370 pounds on a doctor's weigh-in, though. He's 325 right now. 330 with shoes and heavier clothing. 325 without. The elephant is on a high keto diet with some augmentations to carbs as necessary for digestion, and has dropped down to 325. The elephant is working on it. So the other elephant in the room with me is in the background here. Altars and mysticism, magic. I am a practicing mystic. It's what I do for a living. I help people with magic. I use the Force as my channeling point for all of it. I'm not afraid to say that. When I discuss it with a client, I call it the universal flow, the source. I work with my gods or things that I'm familiar with in ritual form with that. I do not think every Jedi should do that. In fact, I think most Jedi do it too much as a supplement to not spending the time in deeper meditation and doing deep introspective Force work and gaining fundamental skills. Yes, you can light a candle and put a cup of water down and throw a rock at the table and light a stick of incense. But can you feel the force between you and the person next to you? That, to me, is more necessary. So, while I am this, do not think this is going to be a ritual magic course or even fundamental magic correspondences or any of that. This is not going to be how to do things with symbolism. These videos are going to focus on Jedi. When I focus on the Force as a core topic in any skill areas or areas that you should be practicing, understand, I have a great depth in it. I'm a Jedi mystic. Not only is it necessary for me to understand all of the ways the Force can be used, but I do it in my day-to-day life. I eat based on whether or not I'm good at this. And my family is cared for. Other elephants. We're polyamorous. I'm going to get that out there if someone asks. I won't mention the name of our third because I haven't gotten her permission. And everyone knows my wife Helen already, so it's cool. I consider them both my wives. If you do not like this, that's fine. If you love me as a person already and you know me, or if you feel that my message has value, I recommend you become comfortable with your discomfort, as it was once said in a Star Trek episode on Deep Space Nine. I recommend anyone with prejudices always become comfortable with their discomfort. Time will do the rest. Time and love will do the rest. I think we've defined the elephant pretty well. I have a dark past. I talk about the bad old days a lot without thinking about it because I didn't know I could come back for sure. And I wished that someone had told me I could and showed me. It is impossible for me to use the Force outside of my own will or to accidentally hurt someone with it at this phase. I've done the training. Early on, you may make mistakes. You may let your anger consume you, and in an act of vengeance or violence, use the Force to hurt someone. If I tell you about myself, it's so that you know you can come back. And if you've gained weight through depression, you can start modifying your diet. I tried a low-calorie diet for about 2 years. I dropped from 360, 370, something around there, down to 345 and then hovered. I couldn't do a lot of exercises because I couldn't get the weight off. Now that I'm in the 320s, I've been able to do my Qigong again. I've been practicing stretching routines. I have a bow staff that I use for back stretching routines, as well as for practice when my feet are good. I have major foot and tendon issues. My father made me crawl around on a broken leg because he wanted a strong son. That leg will never heal fully. There are things that I will talk about that I cannot do that I will recommend to you. I want this also very clear. The recommendation is a recommendation. The minimum is an understanding of how to do things so you can pass it to someone else. That is the minimum. If you have an inability, you should attempt to do what you can up to the maximum. The Jedi community has a bad habit of speaking on behalf of disabled people, I have been told. I have a very dear friend, one of what I call within my inner circle, That's people I trust. That's people I love. That's people I know won't betray me. And that's people I know if I have to say, look, I've got an emergency. I've got to deal with this. I can give them a problem. I can give them a situation, and I know they will handle it. He's one of those people. And he said, I feel like I'm being spoke for all the time. I'm not going to speak for him. I'm going to say what he said, though, which is he would really like it if people wouldn't tell him that he can't before he has a chance to try. He has major, I always call it injuries, because I hate the term disability, because that implies that he can't work around it. He has difficulties with his left arm. It pulls in like this to some degree. He can't use, he couldn't throw a punch with it effectively. If he did, he has nerve deadness in it. He wouldn't know how hard he hit in the tense muscles. He'd shatter the arm and never be able to fix it properly without a restraint cast of such severe degree. It'd probably lock half his body to do it. I've seen him master a sword fighting technique one-handed. I helped him work on it when no one else would, or no one else could, and all he got was criticism. When I say do something, it's to the ability you can. I can't run, but I'll tell you what, if you have the ability to run, you're not overweight so that it'll hurt your legs and knees worse and make it worse. Running was a great exercise when I was boxing, and I wish that I could do that again right now, but if I run, then I don't walk for 2 weeks. So if you can run, run. If you can walk, walk. If you can't walk, stretch. If you can't stretch, do isokinetic exercises, push against your own muscles. If you can't do isokinetics, learn about these arts. Do what you can with your physical therapist. Implement what you can, talk to them. Get a professional who knows more than I do to help you tailor a routine that is fit within what you're doing, that is safe and functional. Learn what you can about all the rest in case you ever have to teach someone who doesn't have those disabilities. And I hate the term disabilities. It implies that you can't. And you might be able to on some level. I've seen Jedi master using walking sticks as weapons. And I say master it because no one else has had any clue how to do it. And if you're the only one doing it, you've mastered it. At the very least, I've seen them experiment with it. I practice with this. Walking stick. Hard oak. Very solid. Why do I practice with that? Because I have disabilities too. I want you to do more than what I can if you can do more. The core of this path is practice, practice, practice. Focus. Repetition. It's always going to be the basics. And that's going to make it very hard for the videos that come after. Because at some point I'm going to be going into, I'm going to be like, oh yes, and since you've done this, you should go do that again. And that'll be in the next video sometimes. That is what it is. The Force reveals its mysteries when you meditate on it in deep contemplation, with the most serious mind. It does not reveal its mysteries when you play around and play pretend. So I am going to push in that direction. I've addressed the elephant in the room. The elephant's getting a little smaller every day. The elephant might top out at 250. He might not get under that. That might be my limit. The elephant might hit 200. The elephant might hit 180. The elephant might not get under 300. For all I know, I could have a major stomach issue. I've had those too. A doctor put me on blood pressure medicine that almost killed me and wrecked my stomach for 2 years during the whole situation after my wife's surgery. But don't think the elephant is ever going to stop trying. Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try, right? Well, I do. I do to the degree that I can. I don't really try. I do. But I've had times where I tried. I've had times where I was depressed and I just tried. That's okay too. You may have depression. That's fine. I'm here to help you overcome that. You're going to be more. You can be more. You can work the path and overcome that over time. I have faith in you. And that's me. That's the guy doing these videos. I hope that this meets you in a good place and it helps you. And I hope that if you have similar experiences, that you can rejoice in knowing you are not alone. And if you cannot rejoice, then I hope that one day you can, and that this was helpful for you, because this is what I can do. Force guide and protect you, my friends.